Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzaro-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello there, fellow conspiracy theorists, and welcome back to Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. I am your bunker-ridden leader, Scott Thurlow. I'm here with my fellow, in separate bunkers. Well, me and Jonathan Eamans are in the same bunker. Mm-hmm. And I got Chris Morgan in his one.
Good evening.
And Stephen Amosi.
Aloha.
And tonight we're going to be doing a movie called Under the Silver Lake, which is from 2018. It was directed by David Robert Mitchell, who did It Follows, if anybody's familiar with that, which we also reviewed a couple years ago for Halloween. And it was sort of like his follow-up, A24, picked it up. And as a shout out to my former friend, from college, I knew a guy named Joe Soria, sort of gotten back in contact with him. And he told me about, he has an idea for sort of a project we might be working on with him for Lost Sigs. But a actor named Jeremy Bob is in this movie. So he made me watch one scene. It sort of intrigued me a bit to check the whole movie out. So it's on Amazon, and we're about to review it. So with that, I have a quick log line. So Under the Silver Lake is sort of like The Big Lebowski or L.A. Confidential Lebowski or like something like that.
Lebowski Confidential.
Lebowski Confidential, yes, exactly. So it's sort of a mix between those, sort of a neo-noir tale. And with that, I'm going to turn over to E. Tell us about the plot in a condensed manner.
A slacker stumbles upon a conspiracy.
Yep.
And so it's attempting to take the trappings of the neo-noir and add and basically go through this kind of absurdist plot dealing with conspiracies. And Andrew Garfield is the
Sam is the main
actor
guy,
of this. Yeah. And stumbling upon what turns out to be an actual conspiracy, but not, I think, to the level of what his expectation for the conspiracy was.
Even though he's uncovers something, but it's not quite what he thinks it is, and therefore sort of let down by it.
Yes, as I was too watching this film.
Yeah,
I think that stylistically they captured the neo-noir very well.
Yeah.
The problem is the narrative, at least for the first part, is intriguing in that, again, it captures stylistically the noir. I feel it loses itself in its own attempts at creating something grander than what they were capable of doing.
It thinks it's a lot cleverer than it actually is, I would say, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I had trouble watching the entirety of the film. I think it was over long.
It's a long film, yes, true.
At points, it intrigued me. At points, there are interesting philosophical discussions.
Little vignettes, you know.
But overall, I don't know. It was a subpar noir film. And for that, I'm somewhere between a 1 and a 2 on this.
Right. What do you think, Chris?
There were a lot of red herrings in this. I mean, the one thing...
It's a noir.
But yeah, but the other thing is, like, he was following one conspiracy trail, and he kept cross-sectioning into others.
Sure.
As far as I can figure out, the songwriter was the one connected tissue to between most of these. I did find it lost its way. There are certain things like the reservoir scene. I have no idea what it was, why it was there, except to give him a bracelet, but that could have been anywhere at any time.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm probably going to give this a 2. It'll probably be a softer 2, and the reason is it kept my attention. It really could have had about 20 minutes, 30 minutes chopped out of it. But, you know, for 2/3 of it, it had me every now and again. It wouldn't. So I'm going to say maybe a softer 2, but definitely like a 2, nowhere near a 3.
Chris, the problem is that there's a difference. There's a fine line between a red herring and a loose thread.
Yes.
And I feel that this was more loose threads than it was necessarily well done red herrings.
I agree with that.
That is a great point.
What do you think, Steve-O?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. There's a lot of things that this film brings up that don't get
They don't quite
tied
get
up.
answered or
Yeah,
followed.
they don't get tied up, and that's for the most part. I was pretty okay with it, but I can't give the question plot points for it because it's like a lot. Like it's like I was almost feeling like I was watching a mix between Hitchcock and David Lynch when watching this. I was like, all right, what's this L person doing? Okay, they're never coming back, I guess. Like, the reservoir thing is like, yeah, why is this necessary? It was just like it felt like the director wanted to have who's it, David Robert Mitchell wanted to have like fun with just playing with like surreality and messing around with that. That said, I did like where it was going in the first half of the movie. I wish that things had gotten tied up nicer. Like we watched another neo noir movie maybe recently within the last couple of years called The Nice Guys, and that is way more grounded in reality. But like that movie tied up all its loose ends really well and did a really good job of that. I thought that plot was really strong. This plot was more in service of the style and the fun, like little diversions down into like surreality. So I'm going to give plot a 2 on the strength of the first half. I wish that they had tied up those loose ends, like Chris said, a lot better at the end. But I did enjoy them to some degree as well.
I think this suffered from the same, and I saw it may have actually been What Culture, Ian, where they were talking about the dumbest endings, either What Culture or top 5 horror movies, but they were talking about stupid endings of horror films, and they said that It Follows had a really stupid ending, which it did, which says to me that it would have been better to continue to not know what this thing was and leave an indeterminate thing than have that stupid pool thing where everybody's trying to electrocute whatever it is. And the more we talk about this, the more I feel like we've gotten to another non-ending. He didn't know what to do with it, so he had this like fucking commune thing. And we'll get to this when I get to protagonist, about the things he should or should not ingest. So I'm right back to, I might stick with it 2, but now I might be leaning more towards a 1. Scott?
Chris, I agree with you on that. Like, look at The Big Lebowski, which is the prototype for this kind of slacker noir. It tied up everything that it needed to narratively, and it did leave loose ends, but there was, in a sense, a point behind those loose ends, or at least like it tackled all the important elements it needed to. There's this movie which maybe for the sake of being surreal,
like I said, it wanted to be clever.
But here's the thing: is someone brought up David Lynch earlier, and this thing is like David Lynch leaves a lot of open ends to it, but that's the point of the world he's building. This is trying to live in 2 worlds and not working for either of them. And I feel that I might have to go down on 1 for this.
Here's how I'm going to do it. So I agree with a lot of it. I think mathematically I'm doing it this way. If we break it down to our old intro body conclusion, intro 1, I'm going to give 0.5 to body and conclusion, equaling a 2. Now, yes, I feel like David Robert Mitchell maybe like threw all these ideas into a blender, like, oh, I want to have this and this conspiracy and this scene. Like, okay, that's nice maybe on paper, but not so much in execution. So I still enjoyed it quite a bit, maybe like a softer to middle 2, but like I said, mathematically, I think that's how I'm going to divvy up the points to equal out an okay to decent 2 overall for plot because of those reasons. So, go, Chris.
And there's precedent for that. What this film actually made me think of, I didn't think of the Big Lebowski, but there's 2 films from the 80s, and I actually would like to watch them with you guys. One called Into the Night, which is a John Landis film. It takes place in LA. And the other one called After Hours.
After Hours, yes!
It's a fucking great movie, but both of these are adventure films through the night where one character gets tossed through a thing and then comes out the other side. And again, there probably Into the Night has a stronger through plot, but I kind of felt like this was trying to be a lot of things. Like with the first act of it, it really reminded me of like an LA film. Like when I was living out there in the late 90s, or there's more movie theaters. I mean, the amount of movie theaters in LA, at least were like the amount of Starbucks in New York. And so, I mean, literally during the day, I'd start at 11 o'clock and go down the block and just hit all these independent theaters. And then the independent movies that were shot in LA had a certain aesthetic to it. I think I mentioned we were talking about a Marriage Story, about how the New York scenes had a very, 70s, 80s New York stuff like My Dinner with Andre or something like that. I can't remember the director's name. But my whole point is,
Doesn't matter.
we had that. I mean, I guess this more goes to style. But what I'm saying is, I feel like, he was trying to do this. I think I think what we're all saying is he's trying to serve way too many masters and kind of got lost in,
Sure.
In
I
all.
think that's accurate. So I'm saying that those are my reasons for giving it an all right, decent 2, but no more. So
Same. I'm going to stick with a softer 2.
okay,
Yeah.
you too, Chris. And you?
I'm going to give it a 1 because
Sure.
for all the points that Chris just made.
Are you dropping down to a 1, Chris, as well?
No, I think it's threes.
I think I'm going to stay with the 2 because I really did enjoy it more than I didn't. And I really do feel like, 20, 25 minutes could have been cut out of it. I don't know. I'm going to give it subject to change depending upon how I score the other stuff.
Cool.
Sure, but that's pretty much how I'm doing it. So yeah, there's 3s except for E, who's a 1 for plot, and I'll move along to themes. So it's like somewhat interesting that, yeah, it sounds like, LA slacker, like he's sort of like nondescript. There's like a running gag where like every time he's on the phone, like just sticking around, you're like, how's work going? He's like, oh, work's okay. Like he's never worked like at all, no one working.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like, and it's set up early on that like his character like sees patterns, or at least thinks he sees one certain pattern, and therefore it's sort of conducive to him like falling down this rabbit hole of possible conspiracies and meeting all these like other, underbelly figures and characters to tie into all these things that he uncovers. So like, I don't know, humans as pattern seekers, I guess. I don't know if that's a theme, but sometimes there isn't a pattern. Sometimes the pattern you think you see, there is one, but it's not the pattern that you're interpreting it as. So I think that like goes hand in hand with conspiracy and sort of like bobbing back and forth between these set pieces and these characters that he meets, and the underbelly nightlife of LA, etc. It's like, while it may not be super strong, or maybe just sort of surreality at times for surreality's sake, like I still think it's decent enough, but I'm not married to a 1. So with that, I'll open it up.
Do you mind if I start with this?
Sure.
It's covered occasionally, especially with his one friend, about the idea of both conspiracy and versus reality, and the fact that they're watching a drone spying upon a woman
Yeah.
at a point when they're discussing the idea of, like, in a sense, this grand idea of conspiracy versus the actual
Like random coincidence.
or not just a coincidence, is that NSA is spying on all of us regularly through our phones. They're having a drone peeping into a woman's room because they find her hot, and like these are the actual conspiracies out there versus the grand ones. But then it gets muddled, and there's actually conspiracy. I find conspiracy very interesting because psychologically, because there's 2 types of conspiracy I want to talk about. One is the idea of wanting to assign order to chaos.
Yeah.
Stuff like 9/11 can't happen because it's not part of the plan. And people actually fear those kind of random chaotic events. That it must have been a government behind this. Or it couldn't have been one individual who killed JFK. It must have been the CIA or a conspiracy
Or
that
whatever,
involves
yeah.
in it. Because that actually applies more to order, that there is something creating these actions behind the scenes. Also, people like to say conspiracy is to not to mask their own failings in life. That I didn't succeed because
Something
the
was
Jews
against
controlled
me.
the universe. I didn't succeed because I didn't buy into the system, and the system controls everything. And I feel that they kind of touch upon this in that Garfield, for all of his purposes, is a loser in this. His car gets repossessed. He gets evicted from his house at the end.
Has no job anyway.
He gets out of his job. And, well, it was not his fault for that. he never
Had a chance.
because of the system that's built up there. And I feel it's a very muddled message out of it. Because occasionally they give lip service to the idea of what is inherently about. So one thing is the slacker prototype is interesting to deal with these things because it's saying that the call of adventure, well, I would succeed if the call of adventure hit was actually something that he does in this. But in general, people say no to that. And it's kind of wish fulfillment of the people in there who aren't successful in life because they're like, if the moment strikes where I could succeed, I will take up that call. And even fails in that in the end, too. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel that the author or the screenwriter was attempting to say something, but I feel that they got lost in their own mythos in a way.
It's an interesting point. What do you guys think?
I think that there is certainly a lot to that. I also want to touch on the like overtly sexual overtones of the movie. That's a definite theme. Like there, and it's like the main character, who is this like huge loser, is just always in a position where he's about to have sex with like pretty good looking women, like constantly.
Wish fulfillment as well.
Yeah, well, maybe, but like I think a lot of it goes into the standard themes of a noir movie. I think that's trying to touch on that. The bombshell, or like the
if you mind me interjecting quickly, is that and a lot of times, like in traditional noir, these are hugely masculine films of men who are get the women, who are the epitome of masculine ideal.
Right.
Neo-noir kind of breaks that down, but he still has all of those kind of he gets all of the women that he wants.
Well, that's what it's so interesting to see this, like, in terms of like the standard masculine character. Andrew Garfield is like this skinny little wisp of a guy who doesn't have a job and like just smells bad for most of the movie, and because he got sprayed by a skunk, and like, so he has all these like things like going against him in terms of the way that this standard trope is supposed to work. But it's really interesting to see them play off of that, and like still have those scenes. In fact, more than you're used to in a noir. Like usually you just get down to the mystery at some point, but like now it's like it followed like this. I think that David Robert Mitchell, he also wrote the screenplay.
Yeah.
Is obviously really fascinated by the way that sexuality works in terms of, based on It Follows as well, in terms of filmmaking and the
Hollywood
these
culture.
Like highly genre savvy films work. And like obviously he's trying to break it down a little bit. Sometimes it works for me, sometimes it's not as great, but I think that it's a pretty interesting dynamic.
Steve, can I ask you a question then? What is he trying to say?
What is he trying to say?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It depends on which encounter you're talking about. Like, there's the first one with Ricky Lindholm where they're like looking around at shit in his room while they're having sex and like kind of distracting themselves from it. There's like the girl that he falls in love with, who he never actually has sex with, but obviously they have a very charged, intimate moment in her room right before she disappears for the entire movie, and then he's supposed to be like chasing her, right? She's the
or finding out what happened
the femme fatale or whatever. Yeah. He's got all these, he's got the girl that he meets and dances with for 10 seconds. And she like says, let's go have sex. And then
balloon lady.
Yeah. And then he's like, has to throw up because he's, for the second time in the movie and not the last, has been poisoned by drugs. So, like, I think he has all of these different encounters in there to mean and kind of stand in for different encounters that, as heightened encounters that we have in real life, versions of encounters that we have in real life. And I think that, taking that and looking at things that way is kind of interesting.
What do you think, Chris?
I was trying to remember which movie this reminded me most of. A lot of loose threads, empty trails, filler to a non-ending. And it's not the one I was thinking of, but sorry, Stanley, but Eyes Wide Shut. We got to the most ridiculous ending. Actually, this was more ridiculous than that was. I am not only giving this a 0 because I feel it's a muddled narrative. I'm downshifting my plot to 1 because I liked watching it happen, but the narrative was not muddled. And as much as I've given like lesser films more points because it at least kept the narrative straight, in all honesty, while I enjoyed watching a lot of this film happen, the narrative was completely muddled, and I really, in a better film, you kind of want to go, where is this going? You know, you look it up.
It's better handled, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think this is particularly well handled. It is definitely more style over substance, and we're going to get to that later. But yeah, I don't really feel any strong thematic components. To me, this is like an eyes wide shut, and I really cannot give credit where credit isn't due. So I'm giving this a 0, and I'm giving plot a 1.
Okay.
I agree with you, Chris.
What do you think, Steve-O? For themes?
I'm going to give it a 1 for themes. I think that, between mine and I'm not all that interested in the conspiracy theory angle, but I think that
you would be.
I think they definitely. I mean, I am, but like in more of a styles version in this movie. You know, like that's cool and all, but there's not. I don't think the movie's saying all that much about that.
I mean, it's a major aspect of the film, though.
Is it? I mean, I think it's just window dressing to like the more interesting things that the movie's trying to talk about. Like, I think it's the style that he wanted to tell his story about, like, these individual encounters that he has with other people, and which I mean, I completely get it if you guys are not interested in that aspect or that take on it. But I think that's more interesting to me. I'm probably gonna give it a 1 for that, for everything that I said earlier.
Chris, you brought up something earlier about reminding you Eyes Wide Shut. This reminds me of Eyes Wide Shut plus Swingers. And I don't care for Swingers. So
it's way overrated.
Yeah, so I agree with you on your assessment of the muddledness of this.
So 0
give a 0.
0 for you guys.
Yeah.
So it's strange because listening to all you make your points, like, yes, I agree that's muddled / mixed messages and doesn't really commit to one end or the other. But like, maybe that's the point, like that there aren't really any answers and like, or at least not satisfactory answers, maybe. But I don't think it's enough to outweigh the fact that it's sort of like just treads water, I guess, thematically for a lot of it. So I think I agree with you guys, maybe a little softer of a 0, but still, I think I'm going to give it a 0 at the end of the day as well. Alrighty. That'll bring us along to antagonist, Steve-O. Who or what is antagonizing the main character?
I don't fucking know. Like, what is the antagonist?
I really wish it were the hour.
Some random assortment of conspiracy bosses? I don't know. Like, who? Like, the owl lady just disappears. Who shot the girl in the fucking reservoir? Who knows?
Those are the dangling plot threads. Like, oh, they're red herrings. Like, not really. They're just forgotten about.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, do you guys know who the fucking antagonist is? I guess, like, the greater conspiracy itself, if it even is one and not like a web of them or like a bunch of them.
No, there is out there an organization crafting tombs for rich people.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And putting them and making them tables in a bar.
And also in line with the king of the homeless people, who is omnipresent.
I think that's Robin Williams in The Fisher King.
And they do punish magically the people who break the code. That's why I assume that the daughter died because she gave up a piece that she
told them a secret.
Yeah. This cabal is effective.
Sure.
The one thing, I mean, given the fact that we're going with the Egyptian theme, I thought the owl lady was kind of like an Egyptian god, because they would have human bodies and animals.
I mean, a reference to it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, there wasn't as strong a connection because they did make a big deal out of her. The first time you saw her on video, she was terrifying. When she showed up in Andrew Garfield's apartment, I thought that was hilarious. Like I said, I really wish they had done more with her. I mean, I got the connection because the Egyptian mythology, but I
Sure.
feel like
And you lived out in Hollywood for a little while, so
Mhm.
yeah.
We're the LA slacker getting lots of conspiracies.
Dude, all right. Well, I'll save that for another time. But no. But the thing is, I was having a like. Are you, Ian, saying like the general cabal is the antagonist?
well, what is antagonizing Garfield?
He's trying to find answers. So I think he certainly feels pressure, I guess, to add on to that.
His lack of a job. Get a job, Andrew Garfield.
His job is to figure out the conspiracy, man. Now he's
Nobody's
not
paying him for that.
Not. He's so bored. He's stumbled upon.
That's right.
So I don't know, like, you're right. Like, I was initially leaning towards a 1 for this because certainly he feels pulled along, and like as he stumbles more and more, like I said, tumbles down the rabbit hole, it's becoming like, I'll say this, the songwriter scene, which is like, again, sort of the thing that like our window into this, antagonized by that because his entire dreams, like his entire life of pop culture is crushed because it's all fake. It's all a message between the elitist conspiracy.
Yeah, this cabal has structured every pertinent thing in pop culture in order to
Further
provide,
agenda.
for some reason, obscure clues lead to where a in-person discussion would probably be more efficient for running this than leaving it on the back of a cereal box in Nintendo Power 1.
Which is
I gotta mention that later, but yeah,
fucking funny.
funny point. But I don't know. I think it's enough for me, like maybe more comically, but I still feel like the character was antagonized by some nebulous cabal, as you said.
No, he was antagonized by the fact that he didn't have a job. Honestly, like
I was just about to go there. Is it a cabal or is it the fact that or is it on
It's
me?
both.
He's got too much fucking time on his hand. That's
I think it's
time on
both.
his hands. That's what's going
They
on.
go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Is all. So
Like this cabal was like, you have nothing to do with our shit. Stay out of it. And he was like, nah, man, I'm bored and I saw a pattern.
not only do they tell him that, they tell it through hobo they developed back in like the 1800s. To just don't talk about it.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's good enough for a soft 1 for me, but I don't begrudge any of you zeros on this front. So
It's gonna be a 0 for me for sure.
all right, what about you, Chris?
I'm gonna give this one a 1
All right,
because any point that any doubt that I had, any point that I took away from plot, I'll pad this one a little bit
that's fair.
because he was antagonized.
Okay.
Chris, once again, I think you've spoken for me on this, that it's frustrating, but it exists in this world. It makes no sense whatsoever, but it's kind of like a slacker going against a Bond villain here.
Yeah.
Like James Bond got killed earlier on, and it's just random schlub
This conspiracy
wandered
will not
into.
stand, man. Does that mean you're giving it a 1, Manny?
I may just for the sheer absurdity of it.
Yeah. Like maybe that's a 3, but
That's kind of the way I felt about it. I couldn't verbalize it, but yeah, the absurdity of it.
I'm somewhat doing the same. So there you have it. Steve, you're sticking with the 0 though.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's move along then. Speaking of slackers, Chris, tell us about the protagonist.
He's an idiot. No,
boring
I mean, intellectually he's okay. It's just, as I said before, they said take a bite out. You have to take he got an invite. This woman was giving an invite, and they're on a cookie, and you can't bite it. You can't let anything have it to it because they won't let you in. So he goes, the doorman's like, take a bite out of the cookie, and he shoves it in his mouth. I'm like, dude, you don't know what's in that fucking cookie. Like at the end, the guy offers him tea. He knows he's talking to a fucking cult. He turns his back on him after he talks to his dream girl, and then downs the tea. I'm like, you're a fucking moron.
Well,
But then again, he did put all this shit together, and he was by definition a protagonist. Basically, it was him that we found through. There was not a scene he wasn't in because it was his perspective. It was his journey. He took us through the whole movie for better or worse. He did textbook definition of a fish out of water, a protagonist bringing us into this world or a multitude of worlds. He served his purpose as a protagonist. How I felt about his character, I thought he was kind of irritating, but also at the same time kind of amusing. So I think I am going to give him a default 1 because he was a protagonist and he served that role.
I mean, yes, he was the protagonist, but I mean, here's the thing for me: he was both bland, by turns, bland at times and boring, and then interesting and flashes.
I like the fact
I guess
that
much like real people, but
he's willing to punch random people in the face.
Like children.
and children
Yes.
as well.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's
I
fine.
fucking love that.
I feel like it was almost the descent of a mentally unstable individual in the world with just too much free time on their hands and finding, like, I imagine that some of these scenes may not have actually happened. Like, he's just wandering around screaming at people.
I mean, in a better movie, it would have been more clear about it, or like at least if they made it unclear, it would have been better executed. But
Like, one of my favorite scenes is the woman from Garfunkel Notes. He's after he gets sprayed with the skunk, and she's willing to bring him the tomato juice and all that. And he's like, "Oh, what are the notes? Vanna White. There's a code in her glances." She freaked out, leaves, and you never see her again. Exactly what the appropriate response for dealing with this madman protagonist. So yeah,
does that mean you're giving him a one?
give him a 1.
All right. I mean,
That's it.
it's. I think the performance is pretty good. Like maybe a lot of it is like the script itself, but I thought Andrew Garfield as Sam was fine. But yeah, maybe his decisions, Chris, aren't always like the most logical or make the most sense.
In fact, none of his decisions are
But that's fine.
make sense.
He kind
It
of
makes sense to him as a character.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like yeah, I think that's well said, Steve. I think that might be why I'm giving him an okay, solid 1 as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was one of the stronger parts of the film,
Okay.
other than maybe style. I liked the character. Yeah, of course he's an idiot. Like every time he does something, you're like, why are you doing that? But like, to good effect, I think. Like they do that on purpose in the movie in order to progress the plot and like to progress the storyline.
That's
So
true.
I think that it's done pretty well. I think that Andrew Garfield does a good job in the role, and yeah, I'm gonna give him a 1.
All right, very nice. All right, so move along to secondary supporting characters, and it'll be Yui.
So there are very good supporting characters in this. The problem is none of them lead anywhere.
None of them matter.
Characters enter, characters leave. They might as well have not been there at all. I don't know. It's.
I see what you mean, but I would.
I don't think I can give this a 1.
I probably am now. Now, yes, like they sort of float in and out, but like they're sort of the centerpiece. They're what hold the glue that holds this little weird world together.
And I think that we also disagree on that the structural integrity of the world that's built.
that's fair. That could very well.
It might be the glue, but it's the pieces are sliding off one
All
another.
right. I don't know. Like again, certainly like I said, I did enjoy the songwriter scene quite a bit. Jeremy Bob. If you don't know who he is, I didn't even recognize him at all because I did recognize him. I knew he was in The Outsider, which I was watching at the time when I saw this. But yeah, like I mean, they're not all fleshed out. Their arcs maybe sort of like are half arcs, even if that. They sort of sine wave and then left turn out of the plot. But I still think they're interesting for the moments that they're there. And again, flesh out this world, this underbelly experience that he's like sort of meandering through. So I think for me, they all work collectively well enough with the songwriter, Jeremy Bobstein, being the best one. But even some at the end, like the guru guy at the end, and his conspiracy buddy that he finds, that he befriends sort of.
All right, so have you ever seen 8mm?
Yeah.
All right.
I
That
love
did
8mm.
an underbelly of like entertainment as well.
True.
But I feel like every character in that at least
Had substance to them.
or at least had a point. What's the point of the songwriter?
That's yeah, but that it's obviously the supporting characters in this movie are supposed to not have a point. It's the way it's written. Like whether or not you like that is a different thing, but like, it's not like, oh, we're going to tie all these supporting characters in at the end. No, that was never the idea of what they were going to do with this movie.
They're also isolated but connected to the greater.
I'm
Like,
not saying that's great, but
I don't know. Just for me, they worked. I think like collectively. So I'm looking at a decent one, but I do see what you mean that like they can be sort of flat and sort of superfluous to a degree. What do you guys?
yeah, I almost agree with that. Like I'm looking at the supporting characters and, like I just said, like, I saw not very far into this movie that these characters were going to be like, they're just points of philosophical conversation, to some degree. where they're all like trying to make they're all there just to make one point, and then they go away, and then another character comes in to make a different point later, which is fine. And I thought that a lot of them were pretty interesting for the time they spent on screen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
That said, I agree, they are mostly window dressing. A lot of them don't do much for Andrew Garfield's development throughout this.
I mean, even the femme fatale is basically a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. She gets shipped on a bus immediately, right? And like you only see her again right at the very end in order to explain that you're never going to see her again. But like, yeah, I don't like. I'm interested. I don't know how I'm going to rate this one actually at this point, because it's like, yeah, they just threw a bunch of interesting characters into a plot and said, "Have fun. You get 2 scenes. You know, do whatever you can do." You know, I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Well, all right. I liked a lot of the supporting characters. I thought they were really, like the owl lady. I thought was hilarious. Topher Grace's character had no point in it whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. But I felt that. But once you called the one girl that he was following the whole time the MacGuffin, which she really was, is she really a character? Because I was going to say, as a supporting character, she was integral to the plot, but is she just a plot device and not really a character?
Certainly more of a device. She's a character in the.
Because I found the owl lady who had one scene that was even on videotape much more interesting than the woman that he was chasing.
But also a device, right?
It went nowhere as well, like as we were saying earlier.
But I mean, and I always love Jimmy Simpson. I mean, he's just
sure. What did he add? What did he add? I guess I don't know.
I mean, yeah, he was kind of quintessential Jimmy Simpson. He kind of had a little bit of the McCoyle in him. And I did like the balloon lady, but yeah, I'm wavering on this one. Now I'm wavering because I was going to say that the woman he's chasing, was the main motivation. But then again, do we have enough of her character to actually call her a character?
And also, there's no. I guess this is the point as well. But they had one moment together.
Yeah, I was gonna say her character was the one scene they had in her apartment,
and he spends the rest stalking her as she joins a cult.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a lot of sound and fury ultimately signifying nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is probably getting a pretty strong 0.
Fair. I have you a 0 already.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 0. I'm going
for 0.
Maybe that's a take on what all noir is, because that's kind of the idea of a lot of noir is like, oh, the main character spends all movie chasing and dealing with somebody that he's known for about 12 seconds.
But if you look at like Chinatown, which is the prototypical neo-noir, it was a nihilistic film, but earned its nihilistic ending.
But all the supporting characters were fleshed out characters.
That's true.
I mean, like John Huston's character, that scene was amazing.
Sure.
And he didn't have a lot of screen time, but you got a really great sense of who his character was, and it was consistent.
Fair enough.
I mean, you got when they're eating lunch together that this guy was a nefarious, questionable morals. And then at the end, you found out that he has no morals and, is just this really horrible person. So, yeah, I mean, you want to talk about having characters have a point that you can develop a character really well in as short of a scene. This didn't do it.
All right. So
you had a lot of funny window dressing, but no substance.
I still think, so 0s for you guys. I'm sticking with a 1, just because I think they were quirky enough, even without being fully fleshed out characters. They worked for me within the world and setting. So let's move on regardless to dialogue. That'll be me as well. Another sort of 50-50, almost coin flip. Like the parts I love, I've already mentioned the songwriter scene, which I do think is a standout one. There's a couple other ones that were pretty good. Like I said, like the running gag of whenever Sam's on the phone, people are like, "Oh, you work?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm at work." Or you're talking to his mom, like, "Yeah, work's really tough right now," while he's literally doing nothing, or walking around town. So some of that stuff was pretty good. Some other stuff was a little, I guess I'll say, stilted or awkward, and maybe that was the way by design on purpose, but it didn't sometimes come across as believable or organic, as you might say, Chris, interactions here and there. So like that's how I'm looking at it. I'm 50-50. So you guys got any evidence one way or another or strong feelings? Hit me.
Well, I'm gonna probably give dialogue a 1. I liked it more than I disliked it. I get what you mean. There are points where it was a little bit. I never thought it was bad by any means, but it was definitely less than at several points. And but I thought there were a bunch of points where it was really strong. I really enjoyed some of the, discussions that he gets into about like the philosophical things that are obviously weighing on the writer's mind as he's writing it. And talking about, the state of pop culture in America and things like that. So I liked it for that, bringing up those questions. And I thought for the most part, the dialogue was pretty good and kept me interested. So nice. I'm going to give it a 1.
Fair enough. Chris, anyone? I'm still wavering, still deciding.
So am I. Ian, go.
So, well, I do think that the writer had an intention of something to say, even if I don't feel that he pulled it off well. But there are moments of musings that I think worked well. I brought up the scene earlier, but when they're discussing the inherent narcissism, in a sense, the protagonists in general, people's view of their own protagonist status in life, I thought worked really well. And I think that he did have something to say. It's just that this felt more of a college level philosophical musing versus necessarily the through line that he needed to actually make a single point that he wanted to, versus a high person discussing different talks, ultimately forgetting what they mentioned earlier on. But I think that the discussions were interesting enough to give it.
That is fair. So
I agree at the end. Because anything I'm going to add to it, I'm going to throw into style.
Okay, yeah. I think I would decide on the 1 as well. Like you said, I think generally it worked more than it didn't and had some interesting vignettes, parts to its speeches, even if it wasn't all as a sum like amazing. All right, so all around. So let's go on to style, speaking of a bit, and that'll be you, Steve-O.
Yeah, I think that style is probably one of the stronger points of this movie. It is just, this is a screenshot for the movie behind me if you're watching this. It's just a really cool looking film. And
it's also Nirvana reference, of course.
I thought that, yeah, so
ties into the film.
There's good music. The score is really good throughout, I think.
Yep.
Like I said, the cinematography. So this is David Robert Mitchell's follow-up to It Follows, as we mentioned earlier. And I think that there's improvement on pretty much all counts there in terms of style.
So I apologize for this, but so this it follows.
Fuck, I knew
it follows.
Do that. Yes.
So yeah, I'll leave it there. I'm gonna give it a pretty strong 1 for style.
Yeah, visually I thought it was very appealing. I like many of the shots, many of the angles that he got. Like you said, there was some not like less than subtle references to other things, like Rear Window is a poster in Sam's apartment and things like that. He's even legit like sitting on his porch, like taking pictures. And like, so there was some cool references, callbacks to previous noir and neo-noir films. And I think it did have its own little identity as well on top of all that. Soundtrack was quite good, Steve-O. So I think overall it did work really well for me, and stylistically is probably one of the stronger points of the film. So,
as I said before, this is definitely a Los Angeles film. And a lot of times I see like Los Angeles films or New York films.
Right.
I'm kind of like, you're really not making it attractive to me because you're not showing me like, in a lot of ways, I think New York and LA are the worst cities in the country because they feel like they think that they're the trendsetters. They know that they're the trendsetters and they live off their own hype. Mm-hmm. But what I loved about this film is, and I haven't been to LA in like 20 years, but it encapsulated all the things that I really loved about it, from the apartment building to like I told Ian when he moved to Jersey City, I said, it's really great being next to New York because sometimes you wake up in the morning and the next thing you don't know what the day is going to bring and you find yourself somewhere in Manhattan or something. LA was kind of like the same thing. Like I'd get up and I was like couch surfing the whole time I was there. Or at least most of the time I was there. And, aside from that, it's just like you meet people and you go into I went to a party in the Hollywood Hills, which was like amazing because it was a very small party, but it had such a great distinctive flavor of it. To me, this is more of the things I loved about LA. And this will go to my dialogue because it is a very transient town. It is a very transient town. And a lot of times people are performing because everybody wants to get in the show business. I was talking to a theater director at this party, which was it was a lovely party, barbecue, Hollywood Hills. And he was sitting there telling me all the people that were trying to be show people and they weren't going to make it because they wanted to be a star, not an actor, or blah, blah, blah. So I was kind of getting a narration of what was going on, talking to somebody who had been there. So stylistically, this is personal because it encapsulated everything I love about LA. And
you're saying it's accurate.
Yeah, it might have been exaggerated. And hey, I was only in Silver Lake once, and it looked like a dump. It's part like from what I understand, it's come a long way. But it's not too far from Glendale where I worked. And no, I really loved it. It had a great flavor to it. It's, as I said before, a Marriage Story, I loved the New York. See, and we talk about After Hours. There's a lot of things I love about New York that I think get lost in a lot of movies. This thing captured LA beautifully. It made me really miss LA, which is saying a lot.
All right. So that's a 1 for you then?
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you, any other thoughts on stuff? Sorry.
Yeah, I do have thoughts on stuff. Thank you. So I noticed this more towards the opening of the film than I did later on when I think it narratively got muddled. They used a lot of stylistic elements as references to like Hitchcock and other and noir.
Yeah.
They used shots that Hitchcock had
Vertigo
and developed. And overall, I was actually the soundtrack, at least in the beginning, was very much a harkening back to that.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish maybe they did attempt to keep it throughout the entire thing, but I forgot about it.
I think it did drop off a bit. Yeah.
Follow this absurd plot that they were trying to do. But initially, I was very impressed by the love letter it was to noir, and that's my favorite genre. And I have to give it a 1 for its the fact that obviously the director knew going in what he was talking about, and he captured that very well, even if he didn't narratively know what he was talking about.
I wanted to mention that actually. I just wrote it down, but you talked about it. So like that Hitchcock thing, like there are clearly references to Vertigo, the car chase scenes.
Yes.
There were clearly references to Rear Window, and even those happen towards the end as well. Like when he's looking back across the apartment complex at his own apartment.
At the very
other
end.
one.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, and I'm sure there are more that I missed, but like those were the two that really jumped out at me.
Well, there's one where the squirrel dies right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Shot
the birds.
That was weird.
Almost.
Yeah, but the shot was a Hitchcock shot, I believe, that he developed the style of running it. Yeah. So.
Gotcha.
Yep. All right. So strong on style all around. And Chris, bring us on home. Do you or do you not recommend Under the Silver Lake? To
be honest with you, it made me nostalgic for the things I missed about living in the West Coast.
Sure.
I thought it was a fun movie to watch, but is not something I'm going to go out and say, hey, you've got to watch this because there's better ways to spend 2.5 hours. So no, I'm going to give it this 0.
All right. Good. Steve-O or E? I'm going to wait to for me.
Well, I am going to recommend it. I enjoyed it throughout. Yeah, it's not like a perfect movie by any means, but like it was fun. Like for me, it was fun. It was just like 15 little diversions made into one movie. Like just I enjoyed it. It didn't all come together at the end like it possibly could have, but I had a good time watching it.
Okay.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
No, sir, you don't. Alrighty. So I get it. Like I'm not gonna begrudge you. Like it is weird because it's not a bad film by any means, but like you said, like nor is it like holy crap, you got to see it. Oh, it's so it stands as one of the best in neo noir or whatever. Like I sort of stumbled into it, right? I was recommended it by a different friend, and yeah, I enjoyed it while watching it. I don't know, man. Like maybe just for simplicity's sake, I would recommend it more than I wouldn't, but by a narrow margin. I guess I want to say.
I will say this: took me 3 watches to get through it.
it in one go. Like, it was fine, you know, like, yeah, it's longer, sure. We mentioned that earlier and said what we said about it. But again, maybe just me, like, it's something I personally sort of enjoy. Like, I like noir genre, as you said. I like the like the Slack conspiracy. And I even mentioned the style where, like, yeah, where, like, of course, the Nintendo Power scene, like, oh, it's the map from fucking Zelda that tells them where to go. Like, of course, that's going to get to me. But just in general, I think it's a neat little quirky, enjoyable enough film, but nor is it like, it's by no means required necessary watching. But I still, 55-45, I would recommend it. So that's where I'll stand.
This movie reminds me of Donnie Darko. I don't know if anybody's seen Donnie Darko lately, but it was a movie that everybody in college fucking loved.
Yes.
And if you watch it again now, you're like, this movie is not as good as everybody like thought it was.
I got you.
So I feel like I would have absolutely adored this movie if I saw it in college. And
I
now
actually
I'm like,
said
it's
the
pretty
exact same thing to Scott earlier.
He did. Yep.
Yeah. It kind of feels like that thing. It's like, oh, this is a bunch of
It would have been cooler
cool
10 years
shit,
ago.
right? Like, this is a bunch of cool shit that like would have been cooler to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have really wanted it to come together as much then. I would have just been like, all right, let it be what it is, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I still enjoyed it quite a bit. So
The thing I've been trying to get to with these reviews was to not let the viscera, skew my vision. And as I said, you guys mentioned all the other things about the style of the soundtrack. I thought was beautiful, and and like for me it was nostalgic. But as a piece of narrative, I mean, the pacing was really uneven. I paused it and I thought I was like 45 minutes into it. I was only like 21 minutes into it. And then, like I said, and then it would get, the pacing was really uneven. The plot kind of, like I said, the some of the parts does not equal a whole in this one, which is, I'm just explaining why I gave it a 0. I mean, I understand what you and Steve are saying, and I see your points, but this is why I'm giving it a 0.
I got you. All right, well, there it stands. So let me give it out. We're kind of all over the place. I've given it the highest score with an 8. Steve followed me with a 7, and Chris and Ian, you guys have given it 5, but for somewhat different reasons here and there. Chris, you turned back the plot score after thinking it over a bit and hearing some more thoughts from E. We disagreed a bit on secondary. The only thing we agreed upon was dialogue and style. So there you go.
yeah,
That actually says a lot, to be honest with you.
We had different opinions, different ones, and it all comes out to a 6.25, which I think is...
Which I believe is what it is on Rotten
Yeah,
Tomatoes.
it's pretty much
there you go.
in line with it. Like, it's a little bit better than average, but certainly uneven. You might enjoy, depending who you are and your experiences, you might enjoy certain things about it. You might not. But there it stands. And yeah, I think that'll do it for Under the Silver Lake. I myself will have to go avoid being murdered by the owl lady. I have been Scott Thurlow, and I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Oh, don't fear the Reaper.
I never do. Chris Morgan.
Good night.
And Stephen Amosi.
I'll be trying to stay over the Silver Lake.
Exactly. And we'll see you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or Mott's?